Let's take a moment now and center into that inner life and center into the true teacher. I'm not the true teacher, let me tell you. The true teacher is the Christ within. So, Mother, Father, God, we give thanks that each of us is hearing our Christ within us by whatever name we call it. And we know that your wisdom and your light are guiding us, and so it is. Amen. Amen. All right. Well, in this month of October, we are letting go of anything that would make us feel separate from God. So my life has been all churned up. How about yours? It has been. It's like, whoa, old stuff's coming back. Old memories. What I've talked about this morning, I said it was old memories of things that storefronts on the spiritual road from the past. And that's what they were. It's awareness that they were storefronts. They weren't the real deal. But I learned. So that's what's been coming up for me. So what's been coming up for you? I want to ask you. Okay. I bet stuff's been coming up for you too. And that's good. And we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be reading the 18th Psalm and talking about how God can get wroth. That's the W-R-O-T-H. That's the King James Version. That God is wroth. Okay. Anyway, we'll talk about that. So let's affirm our truth statement. And you know that we affirm this not to make it true, but because it is true. So we're learning to align our minds with it, and it does help us to grow spiritually. It turns up that subconscious material and opens us up to that God mind, to that Christ mind. So again, I encourage you to move yourself, to blink your eyes or move your feet or move your arms. It helps us to get that energy going. So whatever it is that works for you, you can do that. So here we go. All right, that's the wrong one. Oh well. That's what we did last month. Okay, it's in your bulletin. All right, here we go. I let go of anything that makes me feel separate from God. Okay, I let go. I guess the bulletin that makes me feel separate from God. I guess the bulletin makes me feel separate. Anyway, okay. I let go of anything that makes me feel separate from God. All right. Well, how about that? Okay. We should throw the bulletins in there. Okay. Like people at graduation throwing their caps. Okay, we should do that. Okay. So there was a monastery which had where the monks observed a vow of silence, which is a good thing, really. Silence is a great thing. That's where we find our energy and where we do hear. But there was one of the monks who was known to be quite the rogue, and he was very playful, and he always liked to yank everybody's chain and break the rules and do whatever. So one night, the next morning when they all came in, all the monks came in for breakfast, they noticed that it was actually him that had done this, that there was a great big sign that had been put up there in their dining area, and what it said was, in case of fire, break the vow of silence. That's good advice. So when you feel overwhelmed, and we're not talking about the real silence that monks practice, but when you are feeling overwhelmed, the thing that you need to do is to break that vow. I'm going to change it from silence. Break passivity, right? Break passivity. That's what we're called to do. When things seem like they're getting out of hand, when it seems like there's too much, when it seems like, how am I going to get through this? That's the time to take action. The greatest form of action and the foundation of action is prayer. That is the highest form of mind action, is to move your mind in prayer. Because what you're doing is you're moving your mind out of just, oh, I'm overwhelmed. Oh, I can't deal with this. Oh, there are no solutions. Oh, I can't deal with it. You're moving it into a place where you're open to solutions, where you're open to the reality of divine power. We are divinely human and humanly divine. There is not a separation. The only sense of separation, and we said it in the affirmation, anything that makes me feel like I'm separate from God, right? Because when we get that emotional energy, when we get that overwhelm built up, then we get swamped. That's when we feel stuck. We're never separate from God. It's so important to know that. It's impossible to be separate from God because we're expressions of God, but it can sure feel like it though, right? It can sure, and when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about good. I'm talking about solution. I'm talking about the power to move forward. I'm talking about the power to experience peacefulness or abundance. We always have that with us, and so it's up to us to move our mind in mind action in prayer. That's what prayer is. It is the creative movement of the mind, the highest activity of the mind, so that we are opening up to that reality of the divine within us, so that we're opening up to the deep reality of us, that we are not just that, we talked about that last week, we're not just that tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that is within us, so that's the reality of who we are. Now, there's a little joke making the rounds. That's one of those little notes from God that says, "Dear humans, I have decided, effective now, that I am not accepting any more thoughts and prayers. Pry your hands apart and do something." All right? Now, that is, I think it is funny, and it kind of makes a point, doesn't it? But it's also kind of a false idea of prayer, because prayer moves our minds, it moves our energy, and that's important. In and of itself, that makes a difference. I guarantee you, sitting in prayer, moving your mind, transforming how you see things really does make a difference. And, A-N-D, and that's not the end of it. Because true prayer always motivates us to another level of action, right? Because we're living in earth plane. We have bodies. We're living in this dense expression of God called materiality. And so true prayer moves our minds, and it moves us into taking actions in this material plane. Now, the difference from just taking any old action is this. Sometimes I take actions out of frenzy and worry. But I bet you don't, right? You never do that. Okay. When I do that, you know what I create, right? More? But it can be entertaining, but it doesn't get very far. It doesn't really do much that's productive. So what prayer does, when we move our mind in prayer, what happens is then we take that action in the outer, not from frenzy and worry, but we take it from a place of wisdom. We take it from a place of power. We take that action from a place of love. And we know what happens when we do that, right? What happens? We create more love. We create more peace. That's how it works. That's what we're there to do. Back in the early 1980s, I lived for several years in Billings, Montana. I loved it. It was great. I lived 100 miles from Yellowstone National Park. It was fabulous. But what wasn't fabulous was winters in Billings. It was not fabulous, okay? Because on the side streets, it would snow, and it would snow, and it would snow, and it would snow. And, it was Billings, Montana, whatever. Most people, not me, most people had giant trucks, and so they just didn't plow those side streets. And so it would snow, and it would freeze, and it would snow, and it would freeze, and it would snow, and it would freeze. So after like a couple of months, you had some heavy-duty ice ruts in those streets. And because most people, not me, had big trucks, those ice ruts were deep, and the center thing was really built up. And so some of you have experienced this. So in my tiny little Volkswagen 1966 Bug, it was really hard to drive on those streets because I would high bottom. You know what that is? You get stuck on that inner thing there. And I got to tell you, you had to kind of really think it through about if you wanted to go somewhere and take a turn, because unless some of those big trucks had already turned there and created some turn ice ruts, it wasn't going to happen. You were going to be stuck. So you just kind of had to go straight and wait for when you could turn, okay? That's what it can be like for us in our minds, can it not? We get stuck in those ice ruts because it has snowed in our minds, and it has melted, and it has frozen, and we build up these big ruts, and we're just in them. We're in them. But with the power of our mind, with the power of our divinity, we can indeed find the place where we can turn, where we can do something different, where we can get out of those ice ruts, or at least we can wait for spring, right, till it melts. Anyway, so But we can know that we can get out of those ruts. That's what the power of prayer is all about. I don't have to tell you that right now in our world there's so much going on. I mean, there's weather issues, there's concerns, about relationships in the world. There are concerns about if people are safe or not. There's lots and lots of concerns. And because we have electronic communication, we know about it just like that. So we are engaged instantly in whatever is going on in the world. It's a lot of stuff is happening. The opportunity is to get into that place where am I going to stay in the rut of worrying about it? Of course we're concerned, of course we're compassionate, of course we want things to be different, of course. The question is, how are we going to do that? How do we become part of the solution? And it really does go back down to prayer. It goes down to that, moving our minds. How can I see this? How can I catch God's vision of this? And how can I take mind action? And how can I then take action in the world that I am guided to take? What is mine to do? So that I am part of creating the solution. And the solution is, in the general sense, is always knowing what we've just been singing about all morning. I am one with all people. I am one with all things. What I'm connecting with is the life. The life in me is a part of the life in everything. I learn how to not connect with the stress of what's going on. I notice it. And then I make a choice. How can I look at this situation and connect with life in people, in myself, in situations? Now that requires something of us. It requires that we stop trying to change situations. What? No. We stop trying to change other people. There is nothing spiritual about trying to change another person. Nothing. You know why? Why, Hannah? No. Oh, thank you. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you why. No. Okay. There are many reasons, but I'll share one with you. My perception. You think of your own reasons. But one is because it's interfering with somebody else's walk with God. That's none of my business. And if I'm engaged in that, I am not engaging in my own spirituality, right? They're on their trip with God. That's not my business. You know what your own business is, right? What's your own business? Yourself and your own relationship with God. And so when I come to that place where I'm stopping saying things like, God, hurry up and do something about those people. They're driving me nuts. Or God, change that situation. Or God, make it better. Or God, what's wrong with everybody else? And I quit saying, and what's wrong with me? In that kind of self-put-down way. God doesn't think there's anything wrong with us. Surprise. Okay? What God's interested in is that we say, God, transform me. Transform me. Transform me so that I know who I am. Transform me so that I understand my relationship with you. It's said that Eric Butterworth, the great Unity minister and author, told a story about Charles Fillmore, who was with his co-founder, our beloved Myrtle Fillmore, back in the 1800s, basically ended up founding this Unity movement. They didn't mean to found a movement, by the way. They were just praying and all this kind of happened. But anyway, there's a little more to it than that. But they did not intend to found a movement. But they did, so we're sitting here, so I'm grateful. Anyway, that Charles Fillmore used to say, Eric Butterworth said, he said, Charles Fillmore said, people call all the time and they come to us all the time and they ask us to pray and they want us to pray for better health and they want us to pray for their relationships and they want us to pray for their finances and they want us to pray for this, that, and the other thing. He said, Fillmore said, one thing they never ask us to pray for, which is the only thing that you can really ever pray for? He says they never ask us to pray to change their minds. And that's really, in the end, the only prayer that there is. Yes, we have all these situations. And in the end, we ask God to change our minds and change our approach to those situations. Help us to know who we are. And then when we know that, what comes through is a whole different approach. We see things in a completely different way. The paradox is when we change, when we have a deeper understanding of who we are, the things around us naturally have to shift. That's the paradox. They do change, they do shift, and usually not in the way that we think they were going to. I want to share this psalm with you. I've been reading it daily now for a while. I'm just going to share that. I'm going to share a bit of it, the first 19 verses. And it may sound a little odd. It's a psalm. It's a psalm attributed to King David. And it's beautiful. It's got some different parts in it. And certainly when you read it, it sure sounds like there's this God out there that's doing all this stuff. Okay? So you can hear it on that level. And that's okay as long as you feel connected to that. You can also know, of course, that it's the God energy, the God life, the spiritual life within us. The main thing that matters about this is to hear this beautiful psalm not as about things that are happening to people out there, although certainly it's a poem, so the verbiage sounds like that. This is talking about what's going on in our own consciousness. So all this business about stuff getting destroyed and all this business and God being wroth and all this, it's about what's happening in my own consciousness as I am willing to transform. So let's start out here. So again, realize that this is what's going on in your own consciousness. So David writes, I love you, O Lord, my strength. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn, meaning like the horn of plenty, the cornucopia, of my salvation, my stronghold. I call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised, so that I shall be saved from my enemies. So there's the first part that's saying, again, if I go within to that God action, if I go within to my spiritual life, if I realize the life of God in everything, then I'm going to be saved from my enemies. And who are my enemies? Not those people out there. Who are the enemies? The goofy thoughts, right? All right, the thoughts that say, you're doomed, buddy. Those are the enemies. Okay, so then it goes on and it talks about how we feel overwhelmed. So this is going to be heavy, so here we go. It said, the cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of perdition assailed me. The cords of Sheol, which is like the place of the shades, the kind of bleak place after this earth. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. So have you ever felt that? I'm doomed. That's what he's talking about. Then he says, in my distress, though, he keeps praying. He says, I called upon the Lord. I called to my God. I cried for help. And from God's temple, God heard my voice. So he's willing to move his mind to tap into his spirituality. And my cry to God reached God's ears. That's very assuring. God always hears us. That spiritual source is always there. And then here it comes. Here's what I've been experiencing. Maybe you've been experiencing this week. Everything's falling apart. All your thoughts fall apart, right? Your perceptions fall apart. Sometimes all this stuff out here that you've constructed around it shifts. Okay, so here we go. This is big. Then the earth reeled and rocked, and the foundations also of the mountains trembled and quaked, because God was angry. Or wrath. I like that. That's in the King James. Wrath. Smoke went up from God's nostrils, and devouring fire from God's mouth. Glowing coals flamed forth from God. He bowed the heavens, and he came down. Thick darkness was under his feet. He rode on a cherub and flew. He came swiftly upon the wings of the wind. God didn't waste any time. That's reassuring. God was right there with you right now in the midst of all of it. God came directly and came in and flew and was there in earth. See, that's the big illusion. People think, well, God's not here. We got earth and then we got God. And oh, we got a problem. That's not true. The problem is that we think that's true. God is right here with us in earth. So it says, God made a darkness covering around him. His canopy, thick clouds, dark with water. Out of the brightness before God, there broke through his clouds hailstones and coals of fire. He's not messing around. He's going to get rid of all this, whatever's bothering him. Okay? The Lord also thundered in the heavens, and the Most High uttered his voice. And he sent out his arrows and scattered them, and he flashed forth lightnings, and he routed the enemies, the thoughts that were bothering me. Then the channels of the sea were seen, and the foundations of the world were laid bare. At your rebuke, O Lord, at the blast of the breath of your nostrils. So what it's saying is God will clear out everything. Everything that doesn't work in your life, all the thoughts that are holding you back, all those old tapes, all that old conditioning that doesn't work. When you turn to spirituality one day at a time, it gets cleared out. It's laid bare. The foundations of what doesn't work is laid bare. And then it ends on this note of great hope and great compassion and love, tenderness. God reached down from on high. He took me. He drew me out of mighty waters. He delivered me from my strong enemy and from those who hated me. Again, those are the thoughts, the old tapes. They were too mighty for me. You know, with our human, when we're not tapping into spirituality, we're going to get swamped by all that stuff. Because they had confronted me in the day of my calamity, but the Lord was my support. This is the closing. This is so beautiful. He brought me out to a broad place. He set me out in a place that was gracious, a place in my own mind, in my own heart, in my own life that was gracious, that was broad, where there was plenty of room, where there was my life. And this is the best one. He delivered me because he delighted in me. He delivered me because he delighted in me. That's the truth, my friends. That's the truth about us, and that's the truth about our relationship with God. God delights in us, and our opportunity is to take that blessing every moment, to center into that, to let that be real for us, to let it be so for us in our experience. So you feeling overwhelmed? Keep praying. And let's do that right now. Thank you, sweet Spirit. Thank you for your light and for your love. Thank you for that you are delighted in us. Thank you that you are right there in the midst of us. And so our prayer is today for transformation of our understanding and our experience, that we might be that fullness of that light that we truly are. Thank you, gracious God. Thank you, gracious God. Thank you, gracious God. We affirm this through the power of our brother and our way shower, Jesus Christ, who knows you so fully, and he helps us to know you that fully as well. And so it is. Amen.
When you walk through the storm, hold your head